am a Yank in Sussex. If you happen to find yourself in Shoreham-by-Sea on the coast of the English Channel one fine day, you should know that you're just 3.5 miles from the lovely little village of Upper Beeding. From Shoreham, just take the old Shoreham Road up to the Shoreham flyover, and from there, transition to the Steyning Road, also known as the A283 Road, northbound. The road splits at a roundabout, left towards Steyning and right towards Henfield and Upper Beeding. Now, the village is a civil parish in the Horsham district of West Sussex. It's located at the northern end of the River Adur gap in the South Downs. It has a land area of 1,877 hectares, that's 4,640 acres, and the population at the last census was 3,763. The village is one of the few sited directly on the River Adur, and a vehicle bridge crossing the river joins it with the small village of Bramber. There's been a bridge over the river at this point for nearly 1,000 years, since Norman times. Upper Beeding's immediate neighbor is the village of Bramber, which is located on the other side of the River Adur. Besides the village itself, today's civil parish also includes the village of Small Dole to the north, nearer to Henfield, and the hamlet of Edburton to the northeast. Upper Beeding is on the northern edge of the South Downs National Park. The South Downs Way and Monarch's Way long-distance footpaths run through the parish, so the area is popular with walkers, cyclists, and equestrians. It's also at the western end of the Beeding Hill to New Timber Hill, site of special scientific interest. I've obtained the following material from multiple sources, and I've tried to make sure of its accuracy, but one thing it can't be is complete. There is more that could be said about Upper Beeding than this video can contain. Upper Beeding has a number of amenities. It has 2 pubs, both on the main thoroughfare through the village. These are the Rising Sun, located at the roundabout splitting the road off towards Henfield, and the King's Head on the High Street. The King's Head goes back to at least 1788, over 235 years ago. The Rising Sun is more modern, first being mentioned in documents from 1851, although at that time it was called the Star. There used to be a 3rd pub located next to Beeding Bridge, and so it was called the Bridge Inn, naturally enough. The building was opened as a pub around 1881, but closed sometime in 2009. The village hall is located on the High Street. First opened in 1930, like most community halls in Britain, it is used not only for meetings of the local civil parish government, but also for other community events. I was interested to discover that the village hall is not actually owned by the parish council or by the district council. It belongs to an independent charity created for and by the local community. The village is well equipped with shops and services. It has a petrol station, a pharmacy, and a newsagent. There's a little strip mall at Hyde Square that includes a Nisa grocery store, the Palace Fish and Kebab shop, a hairdresser, and iMend, a computer sales and repair shop. A takeout and delivery service on the high street called Khushbu Tandoori offers Indian-style food to the local area. In the middle of the village is a large grassy recreation area, the Upper Beeding Memorial Fields, which is owned by the parish council. It features a football field that is the home ground of the Upper Beeding Football Club. This club is associated with the West Sussex Football League. And adjacent to the football field are a children's playground and Upper Beeding's primary school. Besides the primary school, on the grounds of the former Towers Convent School, there is a branch of Steyning Grammar School. I'll have more to say about the Towers a bit later in the video. There are 2 churches in Upper Beeding. The eldest is St. Peter's, which is Church of England. This church building is of great age. More recent is the Hub, formerly known as Upper Beeding Baptist. It's a member of the Baptist Union. It's located on Church Lane, appropriately enough. The village's original name, and for the majority of its history, was just Beeding, with no qualifier. The name changed to Upper Beeding at an unknown date in modern times. The reason for the upper qualification was due to the creation in the early 1200s of a daughter parish by the monks of Civil Priory of St. Peter's Church. This daughter parish was located in the area of St. Leonard's Forest near Horsham, 10 miles north of Beeding, and was called Lower Beeding by the monks. Despite the distance between them, Lower Beeding remained a part of Beeding's ecclesiastical parish until Victorian times. The existence of Lower Beeding led to the differentiation in the name of the original Beeding in some medieval sources, but not without some variation, including being called in one source South Beeding and in another River Beeding. The prefixes lower and upper were meant to indicate a difference in status, the lower being inferior to the upper, ecclesiastically at least. The prefix upper is ignored by many Upper Beeding people today who refer to their community simply as Beeding, and this is the name I'll be using in the rest of this video. Beeding's history goes back a very long way. It's unknown just how far back, but it seems that the earliest references to the village in historical documents is associated with the death of Ethelwulf, King of Wessex and father of Alfred the Great, in 858 AD, about 1200 years ago. King Ethelwulf is reputed to have died in Beeding, and was first buried across the river in Steyning, in the St. Cuthman churchyard. His remains were later reinterred in Winchester. This is believed to be Ethelwulf's gravestone, while it served to mark his place of burial in Steyning. It's on display at the entrance of St. Cuthman's and St. Andrew's Church in Steyning. In Saxon times, Beeding had a close neighbor, a hamlet called Celle, as shown on the map. Now that's how my inclination would have been to pronounce this name, Celle, which seems to be closest to the Saxon language orthography that I'm familiar with. But the two locals that I asked about it pronounced the name Selly, so that's how I'll refer to it. The two communities seem to have been somewhat interchangeable, but with Selly at times seeming to have a higher status. For example, in 1595, for some reason, in one document, Beeding was described as a hamlet to Selly. Today's village of Beeding incorporates both communities, but the idea of Selly's senior status to Beeding might explain why the St. Peter Church and the Benedictine Priory erected by William de Braose after the conquest were built there instead of Beeding itself. Or else it just happened that the land in question was simply owned outright by de Braose. In my opinion, the most likely reason why there were two settlements so close together is that Selly stood on separate high ground. During the daily highest high tides in the distant past, there would have occasionally been a swimmable depth of water between Selly and Beeding. Over time, the ground between them became more and more silted up, though, and this became largely dry ground. In the Domesday Book, the census which was commissioned by King William I in 1086, Beeding was recorded as having 128 households. For some reason, Sealy is not mentioned as a settlement in Domesday. This seems odd, but I suspect that the census takers lumped the two settlements together. Beeding has been a very quiet place throughout English history, probably much to the gratification of its residents. But two minor events touched down lightly upon the village over the centuries. In December 1643, during the First English Civil War, there was one skirmish fought here. Royalists occupying Beeding attempted to capture Beeding Bridge from the parliamentarians holding Bramber, intending to advance westwards. They were greatly outnumbered. They had just 600 against 2,000 parliamentarians, but may not have been aware of the being outnumbered part and attempted the capture anyway. They were defeated with the loss of at least 8 killed. Later, during the Third English Civil War, after his defeat at the Battle of Worcester in 1651, the future King Charles II passed through Beeding while fleeing to France. He was offered overnight shelter in Beeding at the New House, now Valerie Manor, but declined, probably because of the heavy presence of parliamentarian troops in nearby Bramber, although it does seem that he stopped there briefly for food and drink. From there he continued to Brighton and then Shoreham, from whence he departed to France. The Church of England parish of Beeding is centered on the St. Peter Church in the part of Beeding known as Selly. The church was built there at the order of Norman Baron William de Braose, who had the lordship of Bramber. He had first established a college of monks at St. Nicholas Church in Bramber, but the college had outgrown St. Nicholas. William had the college moved to a more adequate priory that he had built at Selly. Since the priory needed a place of worship, he had a new church built next to it, in Selly, dedicated to both Saints Peter and Paul, though the dedication to Peter was the only one retained over time. The original priory building occupied by the monks and sharing the north wall of the church was built in the late 1000s and no longer exists. It's unknown when the building was abandoned, but this would have been sometime after 1480 when the last monk was pensioned off. There is currently a separate building on the site called the Priory, but this is now a private residence that was built around 1792 as the residence of the church's vicar. It was apparently built over the foundations of the old priory, probably using some of the materials from the original building. As usual, the church grounds include a large number of parishioner graves. One can also find memorial stones in the floor of the chapel itself, and good record-keeping is evident in the form of the list of parish priests, starting with Robert, or Robert, in 1174, and continues on to the present day with today's rector, Reverend Emma Jane Graham. Also displayed is a plaque containing the names of Beeding's honored war dead from World War II. The Towers Convent School was a private Roman Catholic boarding and day school that opened in 1903. It enrolled girls aged 4 to 16 and boys up to age 11. Naturally enough, the Towers takes its name from the three towers of the principal building. They were once more castle-like, with crenellations at the top, and one of the towers was 80 feet high. But they were later decrenellated, with their battlements replaced by more weather-resistant conical roofs, and the largest tower was lowered to the same height as the others. At one time, the land was owned by the lord of the manor of Beeding. Eventually, the grounds were sold to a man who began building what became the Towers during the 1870s, but he ran out of money before the project was complete. The apparent architect of the project, George Smith by name, bought and completed it in 1883. It has been described as a monument to Victorian extravagance, or Smith's folly, due to its construction cost. Its history as a school goes back to 1903 when the owner of the Towers invited the Sisters of the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament, a Roman Catholic order, to begin using the grounds as a school for young girls. The school enjoyed a very strong reputation among the schools of Sussex, but due to declining enrollment, the convent had to cease operating the school in 2020. The grounds still maintain a residence for the nuns who formerly operated the school, the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament, and who still work in the community. The facility is still operated as a school, however, its function having been taken over for the sixth form of Steyning Grammar School. Back in the days when the Adur estuary filled twice a day with water from the sea, there was near the priory grounds a quay for loading and unloading of ships which had cargo or passengers for the priory. It was this daily inundation by the sea that also made it possible for the easy extraction of salt. These spots of salt extraction were known as salterns. In fact, the Adur estuary has over 50 old sites that were known to have salterns, or created mounds that stood above the tide and were used by salt makers to extract salt from the briny water. One such site, near to the river in Beeding, right off the road, named Salting's Way, is a scheduled monument called Salting's Field. Here one can see the remains of that ancient salt making. There are 3 recognized saltern mounds here, much eroded from their original size, but still evident. Other saltern sites along the River Adur can still be seen, and yet still others are noted on Ordnance Survey maps, though farming and other activities have caused many of these to become lost. Where these homes now stand used to be a significant salt-making site with at least one large mound. These homes are new enough that my British bride remembers when these homes were under construction in 1997. Before construction began, a rather extensive archaeological investigation was carried out. The site was found to not only have comprised a saltern mound used intermittently from the 13th into the 16th century, but also evidence of associated buildings. This map shows the extent of known salterns in the area of the Adur estuary right around Bramber and Beeding. As you can see, salt making was a significant economic activity for many centuries. But as the estuary gradually filled with silt and end in order to provide arable soil for crops and pasture, salt making using the old methods died out. The process of salt making on these salted mounds is fascinating, and I hope one day to make a video describing it. Besides the village of Beeding itself, the parish of Beeding includes two other villages, Edburton and Small Dole. Edburton is a truly tiny hamlet, with probably fewer than 100 villagers. I discussed Edburton and the remains of a Norman-era hill fort on the escarpment above it in an earlier video, which is linked to above and in the description. Small Dole is much larger than Edburton, and has both a pub and a convenience store. But while Edburton has been in existence for well over 1,200 years, Small Dole is called a, quote, new village, because it's only a couple hundred years old. The village has a small village hall that is used for public gatherings. It's situated not far from the village pub on the main road, and it's relatively new, having only been converted from an old Baptist chapel in 1980. It replaced a village hall that was closed in 1911. There is a plaque attached to its roadside outer wall that gives the names of the men of the village who died in military service during the World Wars. The name of the pub at Small Dole is The Fox. The earliest mention of this pub in documents was in 1845, 178 years ago as of the publication of this video. Presumably it was founded at least somewhat before then. It's not always been called by that name, however. My wife reported to me that she remembers when the Fox was called the Fox and Hounds. I presume that the name was changed due to the passage of the Hunting Act of 2004, which prohibited fox hunting. It may be that the owners of the time thought the old name was too close to the now prohibited activity, but there are many other pubs in England which continue to be called the Fox and Hounds. I've been unable to establish when Small Dole was first established as a settlement, but I imagine that it is fairly safe to say that it's older than the Fox. It seems most likely that the Fox was founded to serve the village, instead of the other way around. Another question occurred to me concerning this small village, and that is why it is called Small Dole, with particular attention here to the word small. Not long after I joined my wife in England, she and I visited the Fox for dinner. I took advantage of the opportunity to ask the staff if there was another dole in the area. At the time I thought there must be a large dole, or even just a plain dole somewhere nearby, but they said that no, there is no other dole that is larger or older. And an internet search does establish that there is no other settlement in England that uses the name Dole. It happens that there is a small village in Ceredigion County in Wales called Dole, or at least spelled the same way, but it surely has no connection with our Small Dole. Lying in the gap of the River Adur through the South Downs, Beeding's eastern parts feature chalk downs, also known as hills, going up to well over 400 feet above level ground. The best evidence of the chalk can be found just down the River Adur, about a mile from Beeding itself, but still within the bounds of the parish. Here we have a big gouge in the South Downs, known as the Shoreham Cement Works. Formerly known anyway, it's now called just plain Shoreham Works. This facility began production in 1883 and was a major employer for the local area, providing hundreds of jobs to the residents of Shoreham and Beeding until the site shut its doors for the last time in 1991. As you can see, they were very busy mining chalk from the downs. But chalk isn't the only ingredient for cement making. As it happens, there is a plentiful source of another component found nearby. That component is clay, and there is a large deposit of it at Horton, which is near Small Dole. I'm speculating that this may be the reason why Small Dole was originally founded in the first place, to help support the digging of clay. So here we have the village of Upper Beeding. Thanks for watching the video. I have to say that Upper Beeding is a lovely medium-sized village, and a great place for a short visit. This has been a production of A Yank in Sussex. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe or follow. Thanks for watching, and may you have a very nice day.